We're live. I think so. I don't know.
Kind of, sort of, maybe.
Yep, we are.
There, it come up.
There we are. It takes a minute since we're early.
Yeah.
By a minute. Well, there is our first viewer. Hi, Prep Ford. How are you? Yeah, see, I like how you can see that, Joe. That's cool. Yep. Anyways, I'll show it on here so Steve can see it. There you go. And I think our second person is Brenda.
Nope.
Yep, she's got a third.
Oh, the Idahoan is on. Woo woo! There we go. People are slowly coming in. We came in a little bit early. We still have one more minute. And I'm going to stop that banner and put it on this other banner for a minute, and then we'll let you talk about the camp, and then I'll put it back on. All right, we can actually start. Let's start with our reminder for camp. Go ahead, Willie.
March 26th, 27th, and 28th, we are having the Country Prepper or Jeremiah Memorial Camp here in Southwest Iowa. Thack is running a thing across the bottom with my email address. Feel free to ask any questions. It is here in Southwest Iowa. Everybody's welcome. Yep. It's free.
Yep. And it's free.
Free.
All right. Brett Ford said, I hope the topic is knives. That would be good. And it is. It is about knives.
Too far back.
Yep. So, first off, we're going to start with our co-host, Willie. Tell everybody a little bit about your channel for people that don't know you yet.
I have a small gardening channel that I do a little bit of everything on. We have a little bit of farm equipment that we farm a little bit of corn. We grow some vegetables. We have a hydroponic greenhouse. And I like to camp and hunt and trap and a little bit of everything else. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of everything.
All right. So if you guys don't know, this is Joe from Balefire Outdoors. Joe, you want to tell everybody a little bit about your channel, please?
Well, I've been running Balefire Outdoors for about 6 years now on the dot. I talk about general outdoor stuff, but also some things that people don't usually think about, different policies, wildlife science, general environmental science, laws involving not just the outdoors, but also things like today, knives. So I'm a bit of an all-over channel as well, but generally outdoors and outdoor-related things with a little bit of science, a little bit of legal, a little bit of culture thrown in as well.
Yep. So Prep Forward, you wanted to know about knives. What all do you want to know? Pop up some questions. Well, hello, Willie. Hello, Ronnie. All right. First thing I'm going to ask you is, so a lot of people did ask me, terminology, I guess you want to call it, right? And I think I told you already. A couple people reached out to me and they wanted to know edges. Or what do you guys call that?
Grinds, usually blade grinds. So there's different grinds. There's the blade grind as far as that goes, and then there's like primary versus secondary and all that stuff. So there's definitely a lot of terminology. And
I know you have pictures.
Yes, I have grinds, pictures of the primary type of grinds.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show you alone. Go ahead and show us some grinds.
All right, so in general, when you want to talk about grinds, I'll put out a knife here. A lot of people get it mixed up. There's technically 2 grinds to most knives. So your grind starts at the spine, and this first part, the non-shiny part, is the primary grind or primary bevel. And then your actual edge is your secondary bevel or secondary grind. And there's about 4 to 5 general ones that are very commonly used. They all have different pros and cons, so there is no best grind overall. There's just the one that's good for what you're using it for. So we'll go through a couple here. I've got 4 pictures of them, and then there's 2 more on top of this that I'll explain. The first one is going to be your hollow grind. You can see here that it bows out. It is concave. And so the advantage of this is that there is a very thin, very sharp edge. And this makes it very, very slicey. So this is very much going to be something where if you want to process a lot of food and things like that, it's a very good edge because it stays very thin as you sharpen it versus the next one I'll show you where it gets a little bit thicker behind the edge. This will pretty much maintain that thinness for a very long time. But the problem with hollow grinds, which is why not everyone likes them, will depend because that is so thin. So it's a very fragile edge. So that's where the next one comes in. If you want something slicey, but that'll be a little bit more stable, you'll probably want to go with a flat grind. That is something like this. So you have your secondary bevel, the actual shiny part of your edge, and then you have straight back to the spine. A very common company that uses this is something like Victorinox. Their knives are flat ground. Spyderco uses flat grinds as well. So you just have that initial cutting edge and then it goes straight back. But the key behind this is that it is a very acute angle between the grinding sides. So it allows it to be slicey, much like a hollow grind, but it has a lot more strength. So it's less likely to chip and roll and get really damaged versus a hollow grind, which is very fragile. The disadvantage of a flat grind is that unlike a hollow grind where you sharpen it, it stays thin. As you sharpen a flat grind, it'll get thicker and thicker and thicker, and it'll get slightly less slicey as you go. So those are the 2 main pocket knife grinds. You might use them in kitchen knives as well. And you might hear someone use the terms like half grind, like half full grind, half hollow. That just means how far up the blade it goes. So for example, this is a Cold Steel Pro Light. The grind on this, if I bring it up close, I don't know how well to focus, it only goes up to about here. This would be called a half hollow grind, whereas a full hollow would go all the way up to the spine. The difference that makes isn't huge. I mean, most people aren't really going to notice the difference between a hollow and a flat other than that damaging issue, but that's what they really mean. Whenever they talk about full or half, it's just how high up it goes on the spine for that primary grind. The next one, a lot of people in the outdoors will especially know, is something called a Scandi grind or a Scandinavian grind. It's called that because of where it comes from, this largely Scandinavian countries. And you can see there, unlike with the other ones, there isn't a secondary bevel there, that little black triangle. This is just one straight edge. There is no secondary bevel, preferably on a Scandinavian grind. It's just straight back to the spine. There's no secondary sharpened part there. Scandi grinds can be full, but usually you don't see that. You'll see it go halfway down on the blade. And the point of a Scandi grind is if you look at it there, it looks exactly like a wedge, and that's entirely what it does. It wedges right through things, and there is no secondary edge. That means that the sharpened part of it, the very, very end of the tip, is going to be very, very fragile. But for its purpose with working and stuff, that's pretty much okay. If you go to baton Scandi grind, you might mess up the edge. But for a lot of general wood cutting and wood carving, it's excellent because it sloughs off that material like a wedge. So that is something that's really good. One thing you'll hear sometimes is something called a saber grind. It's essentially if you took a flat ground knife, so ones that go straight back, and you took a Scandi and mixed them together. A saber grind is going to be similar to a Scandi grind with a saber grind because they don't go up all the way. Sometimes people call saber grinds half flats. It's just essentially that it goes up part way, and unlike a flat ground, it's going to be a little bit thicker. So it gives you the strength of a Scandinavian grind, a little bit more of that shearing power, but it still has that secondary or the shiny part of the edge. The next one is going to be something that a lot of you guys probably know if you use axes. It's very much still used on knives, and it's largely considered the best grind because it does a lot of things overall, and that is your convex grind. So it's almost like the reverse of a hollow grind. Much like a Scandinavian grind, there is no secondary bevel. You can put one on there if you really want, but largely it's just straight up on the sides. It is concave, and the advantage this has over a Scandinavian grind is it's slightly more glidey, less points of contact really, because you're only really hitting the point there and whatever it hits on the edge. So it just slides through things much easier, but it still has that sloughing material type effect really that the Scandinavian grind does. So it can do a lot that the Scandi grind can do, but a little bit smoother. It can stay sharper since the edge isn't going to be as brittle because you have a little bit of a thicker edge, and it can still be slicey. So it can kind of do a little bit of everything, whereas something like a flat and hollow ground, they're really meant for slicing. Something like a convex can be slicey too and do a little bit more of the heavy duty. And that's why you see convex grinds on axes. They're very impact resistant, so they might be good on batoning as well. So it's really good to be an overall great grind. The disadvantage of the convex grind is that some people can kind of struggle to sharpen it. I think it's just pretty easy once you learn how. You can look up different videos on it, but one of the easiest way to sharpen a convex grind is essentially put sandpaper on top of a smushy type surface, maybe like a sponge. And as you sharpen it, you're slightly rolling the knife and it kind of just smooths off the edge. It takes a little bit more finesse than something like your standard grinds with a fixed anvil grinder. And it is worth it if you know how to do it. But as far as what they would all do on like a standard pocket knife, you can use whatever one is easiest for you to sharpen and then just see how you feel about that. And then as you go on, learn how to sharpen a little bit better. Or if you hire someone else to sharpen, you can ask them or experiment with other grinds and really find what works for you. The main ones people are going to use are the flat and the hollow, most likely. And then there's the chisel grind. Everyone really knows what a chisel is. But essentially, a chisel grind is any of these other grinds, but only put on one half of the knife. So if I bring up the Scandinavian grind here, a chisel grind is literally just this. And you can do that with any grind. You can have a Scandi, you can have a hollow, you can have a flat, you can have a convex. That's not very common on chisels. But the point here is just to slough off material on one side. And if you think about what chisels are used for, a lot of carpentry work where you want a good flat surface, that really explains why. You only want to be sloughing off material from one side because you want the other side of the material to be left flat, nice square edges and things like that. And those are the primary grinds you'll see on knives.
Did that answer your question, Prep for it? I hope so. Is that right? Joe, did you answer that?
Yeah. What is a good application used for a chisel grind? Chisel grinds are really great for woodwork when you want precise chipping outs of parts. So if you were to come in with a Scandi grind and you wanted a nice clean edge, you could kind of do that. But because of how that V shape hits, it might deform your material. If you really want a good square, a good 90 degree, that's where a chisel really comes in because it allows you to keep the other side perfectly flat as you slough off material on the other side. So you get a really nice 90 degree angle. You can't really do that with other knives unless it's something like a big project. Maybe you're bushcrafting. You can use a saw to get a nice 90 degree angle that way. So if you don't want to have a chisel for really nice cuts and carry other knives, you can just carry your knife and a saw in bushcraft tasks or outdoors tasks and get that same kind of 90 degree edge without the chisel.
Okay. Will, you got anything?
Yeah, what he said.
Oh, gosh.
There's a lot of stuff when it comes to knives. So the grinds are something a lot of people definitely get confused about. And then you can get into blade shapes, which is a whole other ball game. There's a lot to it.
So so, you know, a lot of people, Mora, what is their grind?
Mora's typically will use a convex grind. Mora is a Scandinavian company, and so they're going to use their traditional grind. The Scandinavians did a lot of stuff with wood, obviously, many cultures did, but forests are really kind of the heart of the Scandinavian wilderness. So the Scandi grind has been very good for their culture, and so they apply it to a lot of these knives. You can even get some other style knives. There's Puko style knives from other companies and whatnot. I believe there's another company called Martini. They use Scandinavian grinds as well, and they're making those knives primarily for woods work. They do have other knives from Mora that are like the Kansbull, I believe, and the Garberg. They have slightly different grinds on those because those are marketed more towards some of what the bushcraft survival crowd, so that it's a little bit more tactical everyday use too, not just woodwork, but most of them are on convex.
Go ahead, Willie. You got something out.
Yep.
I'm going to go to you. What is it? Hold on.
It's a more.
What is that?
It's a more Garber, or not Garber. Now my brain went flat. It's the one he just said.
There's the Kansbull?
Yeah, it's the full tang.
Yep, the full tang.
Okay. So Joe, did you ever find out what my knife was?
Oh, for yours?
I me go grab it. Let me go grab
It looks kind of flat ground. When we see it here, it looks like it could be flat ground. And one of the best ways to tell whether a knife is flat ground or hollow, especially because on certain knives,
Okay.
this little guy is a hollow ground knife, but you can't really tell. You pretty much have to take something straight and lay it against the blade, and that'll really tell you. So
this is that Laura, the crazy Scotsman, sent me, right? Did anybody ever find out what this is?
Oh, yeah. So that is related to one of the knives. It's in there's a 714 series that is like that, and that's essentially the extended version of it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's one of those because it comes, the blue means stainless, and then you'll have ones with red on it from Mora. The red denotes that it's a carbon steel. And they do that. Those are kind of meant for, you can use them for outdoors, but that series is kind of like a mix between food prep and fishing, those kind of knives, something that you might use in the kitchen or just around the house, but they're still equally good for outdoors and stuff.
Well, you know what I could feel? I rounded the edge.
Mm-hmm. It's very common with Scandi grinds. That's the hard part because technically a Scandi doesn't have a secondary bevel, but most people, like 90% of people, when they go to sharpen it or go to use it, they'll accidentally create a secondary grind. So having a perfect Scandinavian grind, it's not super common, especially once you start using it.
Okay, then what do I do now that I've rounded it?
The best part about Scandinavian grinds is they're very easy to sharpen. That's why a lot of people really like them. You just can lay it on the stone and push without really having to do too much of an angling because there's such a flat space on that versus something like these where you get such a tiny little edge to sharpen. You get a Scandi, which is huge like that. Very easy to find that. If you've got sharpening stones, those are probably the best for Scandinavians. In fact, that's the best way to learn how to freehand sharpen is take your Scandinavian knife and you just push it slowly across a knife like that. If you're going to use it for outdoors tasks, I would say you don't really need to go higher than 1,000 grit. So you can go with a cheaper stone. They usually come like 600 on one side, 1,000 on the other, while trying to learn how to freehand sharpen. And that's a good affordable way to learn. And then once you really get into it, if you decide you really like that method versus a sharpening angle system, where you have things like a KME, which are ridiculously super expensive versus a Lansky, which are cheap, you can go with either, but freehand sharpening, most people, once they learn how to do that, they far prefer it over a fixed angle.
Well, then he also sent me this one. Is this the 511, Willie?
I think so.
Yeah, it looks like it would be.
Yeah, it's the shorter one. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, same one. But now this one is, okay, so. Hold on here. I forgot the question my friend told me to ask you. Oh, maybe one of you guys could tell me. Does it, the metal, right? Does the metal or whatever they are, some of them are carbon, whatever, does that affect a person's way of like what bevel what grind they want on there?
Yes, it doesn't necessarily affect what type of grind you want to use, but it'll depend on the angle. So certain steels, especially budget steels, can't do very acute edges. So you wouldn't want to put necessarily like a 17 or 15 degree edge on some of these cheaper steels because it'll just be too brittle. On the harder steels, it'll just roll, it will just chip. On the softer steels, it'll just roll. So the steel matters more so to deal with the angle of sharpening, not necessarily whether it's a hollow or a flat or anything like that. Scandinavian grinds, you can do carbon or stainless. They usually will use some of the more budget steels, but you also see them in like 1095, which is still a budget steel, despite what the market tends to believe. But 1095 is a great carbon steel, but it's going to be a little bit harder than most carbon steels. So kind of get the best of both for that.
I have decided I don't like carbon that much.
It really depends. A lot of people, they say you really need carbon steel to be in the outdoors. That's more for a lot of the bushcraft dogma about being able to strike stuff off the back with quartz and do flint and steel and all that stuff. But really, a lot of the people that you would be perfectly fine with stainless. A lot of Moras are stainless. My Mora is stainless. I have a special OD green version that they don't make anymore. You can do just as much work with a stainless as you can carbon. It's just stainless is much harder to sharpen in the field. So if you don't bring a sharpening stone and your knife goes dull, you might be in trouble. But you can bring a leather strop, and if you hone your knife frequently enough, you shouldn't have to sharpen your knife very often. You should really keep sharpening more for when you damage an edge, not to get it paper cutting sharp again. You'd much better have a strop than sharpen.
All right. So Willie has a couple things in his hands. Go ahead, Willie.
Stainless Moras. I've got the Pro S. I do have a carbon, which is a Pro C. And then this is the, God, now I forgot the name of it. This is the companion stainless.
Yep.
So what do you prefer, stainless or carbon? What do you prefer?
Honestly, mostly what I do, I like the stainless the best.
Yeah.
I've had this. Well, this is my second one because I lost my other one hunting. It fell out of my pocket. But everybody knows Jeremiah's Wall, that anybody that ever watched his knives videos. I went and I played with every single knife on his wall one night. This was my favorite carving knife out of all of them. And this one, the Pro S, was by far my favorite deer cutting up knife. Mm-hmm. It's a little stubby. It's sharper than holy get out. Honestly, I don't even carry a sharpening stone with me anymore. I carry this.
Yep, very good.
Touch it up.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I do have the, if we can reach it, the Mora sharpening stone that come in one kit. I think I've used it once and it's too gritty for me. I hate it. But no, I use strop for everything for the most part. If I don't, I use a coffee cup.
Perfect.
Ceramic on the bottom. Mm-hmm. Perfect. You can see where there's no glaze around the outside edge. Awesome. They give these away free everywhere is the best thing. And you will never wear it out. If you break it, you go get another free one. Best thing ever.
Yeah, it's really great. A lot of people think it. Oof.
Yep. You know, growing up, I've always used my mom's mortar. Because she, you know, when they make hot sauce, they use that clay mortar. That's what she's always done. So that's what I do. So Prep 4 wants to know what's the best steel for outdoor bushcraft knife. And he says that he knows that it's an individual choice, but I guess he's asking Plano, Chuck, Steve, Thack, and Joe. Go ahead. We'll start with Joe. What do you like?
If you're in a place where you're going to deal with a lot of salts, you're going to be in a marine type environment, or you're somewhere like Florida where it's really humid and you have salt water, you'll be perfectly fine going with something that's stainless. But something like 1095, again, it's easier to sharpen a field if you do mess up the edge. If you get it coated like on this SE4, you really don't have to worry about corrosion too much. The problem with going with the 1095, which a lot of people will recommend, is it's grossly overpriced in the market right now, purely because it's popular. But really, 1095 is a cheaper steel. It's been around for so long. Everyone knows how to give it a good heat treat, which is very important. That's probably more important than the steel itself, is how it's treated. So if you've got a company in mind where you really like the design, that's probably better than the steel. But you'll usually see 1095. 1095 is good. Don't worry about it rusting as long as you treat it. Or if you go with something like with the stainless from Mora, it's kind of a mishmash. They might use something along the lines of a random Stanvik skill, or I know there's some that use what would be called 4116 or 4110, like Victorinox uses 4110 in a lot of their steels. You don't need to get bogged down too much, but Mora uses a pretty decent steel if you want a good budget one. And there's some that are even S30V, which is also a perfectly fine steel.
Great. Well, I don't know about steels and stuff like that. Prep for it. All I know, basically, stainless steel and what carbon. I like carbon at home where I can control the environment. You know, Al, you can ask anything you want, Big Al. But anyways, yeah. But out in the field, I do actually just like stainless steel because you're on the go. Iowa has humidity. Most of the time, for some reason, right, Willie? Whenever we camp, it's raining. So you know, it's just hard for carbon steel for me. Willie, your choice?
My Desert Romper. I got it for my birthday a couple years ago. I love it except for the
Yeah.
rust. I cannot keep it off. You look at it wrong, and all of a sudden that edge is just rusted. They got some kind of a coating on the top or the side up here. I thought it'd be gone in like a couple hours, but I have absolutely beat the crap out of this thing. The only thing I hate is that edge. It just rusts. I add oil. I've used it to cut up deer, so it's had the deer fat on it. It helped best, but it just, all of a sudden, it just rusts. It doesn't affect a whole lot. It cleans up really well. It works. And then Condor. I'm a cheap guy. Both of them were given to me. This is the Condor bush lore. It has the nice patina on it. This one does not rust like the other one for the most part. And I do like it. It's really good. I do have the mini bush lore too. There's a video on that, how I got it. But yeah, these don't rust near as bad. It's the same steel. It's kind of the shape. I don't know. I like them all. I do have a Kephart back there that was made, handmade. That was it's good too, but I don't like the edge on it as well. But it's kind of the one that I don't want to ruin the most, so I kind of keep it. But no, it's just. But yeah, I honestly, the Desert Romper's my favorite because I love the micarta handle, the scales.
Awesome.
By far the best. Wood will chip eventually. This you would pretty well have to grind off. I feel it's just it's stupid.
I have the same. Yep. Because we know who these are from.
Yeah. I've got my good one back here. If I can get up, I put everything
all right.
out so I got it.
Okay, so Unpaved does have a question, but before I go to Unpaved's question, I am going to go to the side chat, and I'm going to go ahead and announce our side chat. Okay, first we have Prep for It. Welcome, he was our first, the Idahoan. We also have, oh, geez, my thing just went crazy. Plain old Chuck. We have Jay in the Sticks. We have Sean Brahms. That is Willie's brother.
Brahms.
Brahms, sorry. Kaylin
like
Strain, welcome. Yeah. Kaylin Strain's out there. Big Al is out there. I'm Paved Explorer. Wood Pigeon Outdoors is also out there. Creative Redundancy is also out there. So welcome everybody. So Unpaved Explorer says, I can never keep the manufacturer edge angle. I know there are sharpening systems that will bring it back to the proper angle. What can I do if I manually sharpen my knives to maintain this angle?
Math. That's pretty much the best way to do it. Is you want to determine your angle, and you pretty much determine it based on a triangle. So if you're going to be sharpening against a stone, think about it like a triangle. You're getting this, and then the angle where you want to go is going to base how high up you want to tilt that knife. And the easiest way to do this is to just do a triangle mathematics thing. If I can find it, I'll give it so they can put it in the description for this. But you calculate, you do your angle, your side, and your side. So you take how thick your knife is, and that's one side of the triangle, equal distance on the bottom, and then that angle you want to get. So say you want to have a 15 angle per side, you want that to be the 15 there, and you determine how much that third side is going to be on that triangle, and that's how tall up you want to adjust your knife. It's a little bit nerdy how to do that, but you can just stack up pennies as a reminder. Super cheap way to do it, and that can get you almost a perfect angle until it becomes muscle memory. Once you start doing that a lot, you won't have to use any angle guides because you'll just be able to do it just naturally. But I wouldn't worry about it too much about getting exactly perfect. The difference it makes really isn't much unless you're like really far off.
All right. Thank you. So yes, Al, you can ask any questions you want. Let's see. Oh, what is this one? Can somebody answer this one? What is that? Is that a 01 tool steel? What? I don't know the answer to that. So go.
01 tool steel is a good steel. You're mostly going to see that from custom knife makers, though. You won't really usually see 01 or any of those niche steels on a production knife. So if there's a custom maker you have that is using 01 tool steel and you really like the knife and it's a fair price, I don't know any problems with 01. A lot of people really like it.
So is it a harder steel?
So when it comes to the type of steels, they do fall in a certain hardness range, something called the Rockwell Hardness Scale C. There are multiple Rockwell scales, but HRC, the only problem with just going based on the steel alone is that there's a process of treating the steels, how it's hardened, how it's heat treated, and that will vary how hard that steel is. So you could take a really hard steel, do a very bad heat treat, and it'll be softer than a much cheaper, supposed to be softer steel. So it's really going to depend on each maker and each batch exactly how perfect it is. And so you really would rather go based on a maker you know does a good heat treat versus this steel is going to be harder than that because there's no guarantee if the person doesn't know how to heat treat. I would say 01's kind of mid to high range when it comes to steels. It's just that not a lot of people are comfortable making with it. So that's why you really only see it with custom makers. And it might be a little too expensive and hard to get the supply chain going for production knives with 01.
So, Willie, maybe you can help out with this one. Big Al buys old knives, but it can't keep an edge.
Part of that is your steel. Personally, personally for me, for hunting, Mora Pro S. You'll love it. It's $14 when I bought it, $14, $15. If something happens to it, you can honestly not care. You go buy another one, and it is deadly sharp out of the package. You don't have to do anything. I personally hardly ever use a sharpening stone. I feel that's the best way people ruin an edge.
Oh, yeah.
I strop it, and this thing is just, it cut up a cow and about 4 deer with just this one strop. I don't hardly ever use a sharpening stone, strop it, and I agree, a hatchet, because you should not mess with bone. I do not cut the rib cage with the bone with the knife. That's what a hatchet's for. Use the right tool for a job. You start doing that, you start ruining your edge on your knife, and then you just fight it the rest of the time. We learned that a long time ago. And for small game, game shears.
Oh, yeah.
You don't ruin your edge on your knife. These are made for cutting bone and chomping stuff. Use the right tool for the job. Your knives will last longer and stay sharp.
Okay. Big Al wants you to name that knife that you were using again, please.
Mora Pro S.
Mora Pro
S for stainless. S is stainless. C is carbon.
Awesome.
But it's PRO with the letter S or C. Carbon or stainless. I always go stainless because food processing, stainless.
Yeah, and more color code, so that's why one's blue and one's red.
Yeah. So, Joe, then let's say you do run into an old knife and you can't tell what kind of metal it is, right? I mean, what kind of steel or whatever. How is there a test? Is there a test that you can tell if it's 1090, if it's whatever you guys were talking about, 01?
So you can do a lot of fancy stuff with a chem lab, but in terms of the person at home, on a lot of old knives, they never even like really old knives, something like this is a Buck 307. They stopped making them a long time ago. If I try to open this here, I don't think they even list what the steel is on it. They kind of just used way back in the day, whatever was most convenient at the time. So even some of the people that worked for these companies had no idea what the steel was. The only way you could really test things is to go through a lab, but you can kind of gauge from the period. You can look up historical pieces where we know what they are. So if you're really curious, you can look up and say, well, what was Buck using from 09 to 2010, or go back to like the 70s and do that. You can easily tell whether something was a semi-stainless or stainless versus carbon. So something like this Utica Sportsman was made in stainless, but you can tell it's got a lot of kind of like patina on there. stainless is not stain proof. So the easy way for me to tell if this is genuinely stainless, which it is, or carbon, is if I'm not worried about ruining the knife, I can take something that's acidic and just do kind of like a forced patina on it. I can rub it through, and if I like the patina, I can keep it. If it ends up being carbon, it will darken up pretty quickly. And if it's stainless, it really won't. And that's the best way to tell stainless versus carbon. Just force a patina on it. And if it's something that'll force on with lemon juice or something like that, you'll quickly tell that it's carbon or not. But in terms of the actual specific steel, that'll be very hard. But the actual era it was made in can be very indicative, because a lot of these modern steels, things like O1, M390, M4, they only existed at a certain point in time. So you'll know if your knife is pre-1970, what kind of steels were generally being used.
Okay, so you probably lost a couple people. I know you kind of, in a way, lost me if I hadn't learned from Willie and Jeremiah. Patina, explain that word to them.
So patina is like good rust. You call it patina. It's kind of like a darkened coating. So this is a force coating. This is like a powder type coating, and it helps prevent the knife from rusting. But you can do with something like an acid. Ferrochloric acid is another one. You put on a good, nice.
You have it? Okay, hold on here.
Yep.
Go ahead. Keep talking, Joe. I'm just showing the patina.
Yep. So you can see that it's kind of a slightly darkened blade, not quite black, but it's got like a gray film on it. And that's what a patina is good for. It's a good, nice, thin layer of rust. It's not a pitting rust where you're going to get really damaged. Think of those really red, dark rust spots that make your car fall apart like mine is. That's the bad rust we want to prevent. And so if you have a nice, good, thin layer of rust, a controlled rust, it helps prevent that from happening. And that's why a lot of carbon steel knives, like how my SE's green, they're coated, but once that coating wears off, they'll start to become that weirdish gray color with use, and that is a patina. It's just a good protective layer, and it's another layer you'd want to put, obviously, still some sort of oil coating on it to help, but just the patina alone for some steels will keep it from rusting for a pretty decent amount of time.
Good. I'm going to show everybody that red rust, hopefully it shows up, that you were talking about. I have a tiny spot of it. I don't know if you guys can see that tiny spot right there. Yeah, that is the red rust that we want to avoid, correct?
Yes. That eventually will start eating through the blade. It'll weaken it. You can get it on the edge, and it's not preferable, but if you get the bad red rust on the edge, you can just kind of sharpen that away. But if you do that too much, you eventually get no knife on the metal, and it gets just not great. But if you start pitting on the actual body of the knife, that becomes a problem, because then it will start hanging up. You'll get bacteria in there. It's a food prep knife. It pretty much creates little craters, and it also just doesn't look very pretty. If it gets really, really bad, like if you leave a knife out for too long, it can pretty much cause the knife to crack in half. But usually there's been some historical pieces even that you can still clean up, but it's just a lot of work. You have to take a lot of metal when you get that bad red rust.
Awesome. There's this is kind of what Willie was talking about, right? So it says, being older than most in the chat, you may not know the old insulators we had around the homes make a great knife sharpeners last forever, right? Yeah, I think, yep. So, hello, Trey, how are you? Let's see, what else do we have here? Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets there. There.
Yep.
Is like here. Creative redundancy kind of explains it. It's like when copper gets that coating. Yeah. All right. Big Al says, now, Willie, you can take this one because you have one in your hand. It says, do you just use a strop? Do you set the edge first, then use a strop on a knife? Or, because I was always told that once it comes sharpened, you just drop it before every use.
If you want to switch it so they can see me, since you're still on.
Yep, I'm going there. Yep, I'm trying. All right, there you go.
These strops that we got from Jeremiah have the elastic cord on them. So it's stretchy. It's kind of like a mini bungee cord. And you can see it's got the peach stuff. The
almost kind of like the suede side, I guess you could call it.
Strap wax.
it's got the compound on it, the peach compound on it. And when you do it, I'll try to do this where I don't really have anywhere to. I'll pull a knife out. If I can I almost need a third hand. Now it's not in my camera. Where you do this, I'm kind of going backwards, but you always pull the knife up against it. So you're actually not cutting in. You can't really see it. You're not cutting into it. You're pulling up. That way you're getting the edge. And where the leather is bendy, it kind of conforms to the edge of your knife. I don't know if you can kind of hold it. Because you'd hold it like this and you would swipe it. I usually go down, but I can't do it with my hands.
Can you hook it to the back of your chair? Hook it to the back of your chair. I think you can.
I don't know if there's anywhere to hook it to.
Oh, crap.
And you want to make sure you have a good strap too. And some of them will come preconditioned and stuff like that. If your strap's like rock hard, you can see how Willie's curves. That's really good and indicative that it's well treated.
I don't think you... There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm being resourceful. It might not work the best, but you can see what I'm doing. And then you take it and you rub. Now I'm rubbing my hand. I got to stand on this side of it. And then you just take the knife and run the back side down. And then I go up. Can you see what I'm doing there, kind of?
Yep. Yeah.
And then you just run it across the whole knife. But that way, it's bending the leather and it's conforming the sharpness on it. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as you're running it up it or down it, it bends. And that's the good thing with the shock cord. It just makes it, and you can hook it to any tree, or I've used on an antenna on a pickup before, just whatever. And then it just, and you can see, if I get on there, it gets the little polish. It's like a polishing compound in the leather, and it actually just sharpens it up really nice. And it kind of polishes it, which makes it shiny and sharp.
Fantastic. All right.
Of course, my camera's back.
So,
it helps prevent rust too when the knife is shiny. So it does double purpose.
Okay. So, creative redundancy. Joe, can you want to take this one? Thoughts on...
It does
what
work.
Is that?
It just depends. So it's like a polishing compound that jewelers use for rings, other jewelry, and whatnot. It will work. It depends on how you apply it, though. You can put jeweler's rouge on a cloth to get a nice polish. But if you want to do a good stropping compound, usually it's better to go with compounds formulated to be on leather. But I haven't heard anyone having problems with jewelry's compound either. Most people just go with whatever's cheaper. And it depends on, like, if you want to just use it purely for stropping or shining the knife. I know people who use jewelry rouge just to make the knife look pretty, and then they'll use stropping compound to really work it. You don't even technically need stropping compound, but it does help quite a bit. It makes it so you have to do less passes, and it works for you instead of you having to work for it.
Okay, fantastic. So, Big Al, we're going back to you again, Willie. Do you use the stone first and then strop, or you strop?
I never use this. Unless I have a nick or something that bad in it, I never use a stone. Unless there's a big nick or something, and then otherwise I just use strop. 99.9% all I use is a strop because it's all I need. I just need to touch up the edge, and it takes less metal off, because every time you're sharpening it, you are sanding the metal off. So eventually your knife will, because even an old, I used it over here, the kitchen steel that comes with about everybody's kitchen set, it's the handle with the steel on it. It works, but it takes more metal off. And we use these in the kitchen, but I brought it just to show. I didn't know what I was going to need. It worked good for stropping, apparently.
Well, I usually use that metal one first, then I use a ceramic one, and then I go to the strop.
I just go straight to the strop 90% of the time. And if I do need
I have the ceramic one because
coffee cup, or I use the cheap Smiths. They're $3 at Menards. I never use the the steel end, I just always use the ceramic if I'm in a hurry. And it's just got two, if I can get it in there, two ceramic rods stuck in the plastic. It's $3. It works in a pinch. It's quick and it's small. It'll fit anywhere in a pack or anything. But
yeah, the ceramic part
Thanks,
of those
Al.
are really
That's a
good.
great comment. Great comment. Thank you so much for saying that, Al. Let's see. We have one from Kayla. Oh, hi, Ramsey. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Ramsey. He's 7'3" or something like that. He hangs all my lights for me. All right. There you go. Who wants to answer this one? I don't have any stropping compound. Which
I
one
don't
is
have any on me,
best
but
for
it
any
comes
steel
usually
type?
color coded. So like Willie's is yellow with that compound. I use a green
it's actually
compound.
peach.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
This
color
is
has
what
a lot to do
Jeremiah
with it.
had, and he swore
You
by
have a
peach.
yellow one, right?
I mean, that's
Yeah. And then we have a yellow one. I don't know what the yellow one's about.
It depends on the maker. So every maker kind of has their own color coding, but they try to be about the same. It really depends on like what kind of mirror finish you really want, if you even want one at all. Like I use green from the one company and it's great. And those ones you can see like Willie's results and they all do really fine. Pretty much any is better than none.
Wow, look at that. Infantry, so you could even use old denim.
Yep.
Okay. All right, Ramsey said he's not 7'3", he's 6'10".
I'm only 5'7", 5'8".
I'm 4'11". All right. So whoever answered the other one, answer this one now. The next person. I have an old knife made of German steel. It is good steel. The handle is sloppy. I tried to swell it, but it didn't work. Should I replace it with a wood grip or use leather rings? I have no idea, Willie, Joe.
I'll let Willie go first on this one.
I feel it's personal preference if you like the wood or the leather feel, and if you want to keep it with what it is or whatever. But you could do either, honestly, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
without seeing it.
Joe?
You can do a little bit more with the wood in terms of staining, but in terms of the leather rings, those will probably be a little bit more comfortable. It depends on how you finish it. But the only problem with leather rings is if you mess one up, you pretty much have to take the full thing apart to restack it. Something like an S-Wing axe, you have to do that. Versus if it's wood, it's a little bit easier to replace, more convenient. You don't have to pop like both scales off or anything like that if it's a double scale knife like this. But if you're doing something where it's like a molded wood like this, then it's kind of a moot point because they're both going to be equally hard to replace.
Okay. So a lot of us don't like to use the carbon because of the rusting or whatever. What oils do you guys suggest to keep it, clean and nice?
Bacon
Mineral
grease.
Oil. That's a good one too.
I use most of mine. I use the oil in the house, coconut oil, vegetable oil, just because I have it. That way, it's good for. I mean, you could always use like a different any automotive oil or whatever you would want, but I wouldn't want to cook with it or do something like that. That's why I always try to use like a vegetable oil or coconut oil, so that way it's food safe. Because I would eat vegetable oil, I would not drink motor oil.
Okay.
Yeah. I just use your standard mineral oil. I can use it on my pocket knives for the pivot as well. Some people get a little fancy and want to use nano oils. Mineral oil is perfectly fine for lubricating pocket knives, and it's as good on the blade as well. The only thing I wouldn't recommend is WD-40. It doesn't last as long, and it's not really meant to be a pivot lubricator or a blade coating. It's more WD, water displacement, and a rust dissolver, not an inhibitor. There is some things, I believe WD-40 makes a silicone spray, and that's okay for pivots. But when you can just get cheap mineral oil or bacon fat oil or olive oil, they all work really well. The only time you wouldn't necessarily want to use a vegetable oil is maybe if you don't use the knife a lot. Sometimes olive oil can go rancid if the handles aren't treated in the right way, but I've never ever had a problem with using olive oil or vegetable oil. So really, whatever you have around the house will work. Just remember, it's got to be food safe if you plan on using it for food prep.
So if you are worried about olive oil going rancid, do you worry about the bacon grease going rancid?
I don't worry about the olive oil.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't understand what this means, so can one of you take it?
Oh, so you're essentially making a grindstone, but out of wood. So it's like a reverse grindstone. It's what it sounds like. Yeah, you can do that as long as the wood is at the right grit, essentially the roughness. It should work pretty well that way. You're pretty much doing the reverse of sharpening. Like if you think of a grindstone sharpening into the blade, you just do the opposite with a smoother material. They've got polish wheels that are like that as well, made out of like not really cotton, but kind of fibrous material, and you can put strop compound on those as well. So it's a pretty standard method. You can make a wheel in the woods if you really wanted to.
So have you guys ever used gun oil?
I haven't, but I know Jeremiah used it, the frog lube.
Mm-hmm.
He used to use that all the time. Yeah. And then that would help lubricate the sheaths up.
All right, so I'm going to switch things up from steel and care from that to fixed blades or folders. Right? I know that everybody carries one or the other, either in their pocket or on their hip. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about it, because I've seen. Yeah. So tell me why, because they're like, I know you're a big Spyderco fan, right, Joe?
Yep, I've got a few. It really, for me, it depends. I'm a smaller guy. I've got about a 33, maybe 34-inch waist. So there's no way I can conceal something like this just walking around town. It's just way too big and bulky. I've got this little guy here. This is a Cold Steel Mini Pendleton Hunter. This is only a 3-inch blade. That's the biggest fixed blade I can conceal carry in New York. I don't have to conceal a fixed blade, but there's a lot of snooty folks that aren't very knife friendly, so I prefer it. So if I'm going to choose a knife to carry on me, do I want a 3-inch fixed blade or something that's a 3.5 folder that compresses to be much smaller than this total package? For everyday life, I'm always going to go with a folder, but sometimes I do carry a fixed blade. If I'm going to be in the woods, I don't care about carrying something like an SE4 or the Gerber Strong Arm. This is probably the only fixed blade I can everyday carry as a skinny dude. And even then, it's not that it's illegal. It's just that you get a lot of people that get very concerned. They always think of fixed blades as the scary ones. Most people, they might say, oh, it's a black knife, it's scary. But if I'm carrying something like this bright blue Pro Light, no one's really going to care that I'm using it. Versus if it was a fixed blade, even if it was bright blue, people might get concerned.
Willie, what do you carry?
I got a Kershaw because it was given to me. It's a pretty nice, if I get it in the right spot, it's a pretty nice, I don't like, it's so curved, but
a lot of belly.
I use it all day at work and it cuts and it stays sharp pretty good. And I can't complain with it. The only complaint I have about it now is the little pins that you use to pick it out. It's developed a rattle in it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been driving me nuts. I've been trying to figure out what to glue it on with to keep it from rattling. But
yeah, those will unscrew.
It isn't. It's actually just like a rivet on both sides.
Oh, they just press fit them?
Huh. Yeah, or something. I don't have a clue. But yeah,
I know some of the nicer ones unscrew.
So I don't know. I haven't. It won't spin. So I just always thought about smacking it with a hammer and seeing if it tightens it up. But I was afraid to break it. But
you can kind of put them in a vise. I've done that before.
But either when I'm out in the woods, I a lot of times will put a knife on. But most days I either have my multi-tool or just a pocket knife.
Because too many pocket knives.
Well, and then I usually have a knife in the pickup or the Tahoe that if I need a big knife, I have one with. It's just I don't carry it on me because I live out in the middle of nowhere and it's not much of an issue.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
So like I said, I'm 4'11", so I don't carry a lot of stuff in my pockets. I will put one on my hip, and that's usually, whatever knife so if I'm hunting, I'm going to use that Mora or something. But a lot of times when we're camping, I always have my neck knife. I carry my Mora Eldris. It's
Mhm.
small and it goes inside the shirt so that way I don't tangle up in stuff. So to me, it's just more convenient to have a neck knife, you know.
Mhm.
Actually, Johnny from Prepping Life was the one who gave, yep, something like that, my very first
Yeah,
knife.
these are very close.
So, yep, yep. So I like them. I like neck knives much better. So I think this is the second time I've seen this name, the Victorian Knox,
Victorinox,
right?
yep.
Yep.
The traditional Swiss
I
Army
have.
knife.
Oh, okay. I have something similar, but I think mine's a generic Walmart.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that make them now, and there's a lot of the confusion because there was Victorinox and then another company called Wegner, and they eventually kind of conjoined together. So you might see things that are Swiss Army knives that are different companies, or one that says Wagner, one that says actual Victorinox. They're all pretty much the same tools. Germany came out with a lot of tools, especially World War II era and after. There's a lot of ones that are very similar to the Swiss Army knife. So they're very popular all around the world.
Awesome. So one of my favorite tools that I've run into is this one, right? I'm gonna hold on here. There we go. It's this one right here, right? It's like a little mini axe.
Mhm.
You guys see that? And it has the, for I guess a screw head or whatever. And then of course it has all the, little, because a lot of people like, what is that thing? A Leatherman tool, you know?
Yep, a Leatherman. I got my
So
Leatherman very
yeah, so
similar.
this is kind of like a Leatherman, but with more cutting than that. So, but my problem is this too sometimes gets that rolled edge. Now, would you care for this the same as almost like a knife, or what edge would you put on this?
Hmm. It probably depend on if you were using it like a standard knife or if you were using it for carving. You could pretty much put anything on there. But if you're using it more like an impact tool, like an actual like mini hatchet and wood carving, you could probably go with a convex edge if you're comfortable doing that. Just because it's got the good glidey slideness of a slicer knife, but it's more impact resistant than something like a flat grind would be,
Oh, I guess
and
that will help, huh?
it helps a lot.
There.
Yeah.
That's
So
how that looks.
it
It
looks
looks like
almost
a
like a
hollow
flat.
grind from here.
Oh yeah, because there's a slight curve in. Yeah, so it looks
Wait,
like they
you want
thinned out
me?
the cheeks on that.
Okay, here. We'll go like this again. There we go.
Yeah, it looks like they
Sorry,
definitely
I'm not.
cut a hollow.
Okay. So this is called a hollow point.
It's
Is that
kind of a
what you
hollow
guys just
grind. They
said?
could have just thinned the cheeks out.
Hollow grind. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then it'll have that
All
extra bevel
right.
on it.
Great. Hello, Vanessa Kitty. How are you? So, anybody else have any more questions? I mean, we've had a great discussion. A lot of people really like this, and I really am enjoying myself too because there's a lot of stuff. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm not going to remember. I really am not going to remember, but I love having discussions about stuff like this because I love to learn. That's why I'm asking most of the questions myself. But all right. So everybody has a knife that they like for different situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, weaponized knives. Well, I mean, oh, well, maybe we should go to this. We should talk about this because Willie has a bunch of stuff behind him. Look at that.
Like a blank like this. And I have Kydex sheaths that he made for me. This one's actually my son's. And it's got to have the click.
Mm-hmm.
And this one has a 10 on the back. I do own all of his Kydex making stuff, which is the pile of stuff behind me. I have his press. I have his heat gun and the toaster oven to heat it up. All of the dangler pieces, all of the screws, everything. And his press right there for putting the rivets in. I am going to attempt to make some, and we've got lighter deals. I have yet to make one. I just finally got the drill press in the mail, and so I have yet to do it. But I do have all of the different colors back there are Kydex pieces that come from him. I have a whole, I'll move my chair so you can see better. All of the different pressed, let me get all my knives out of the way. These are actually ones he had started. If you watched his channel any, you know he was always trying to sell a few here and there. They're all in various stages. I've got to learn how to do it. These will be marketed as something special, but I am going to attempt to make some for myself and other people, but I'm kind of busy right now to learn.
It's very forgiving material, so it's a nice thing to learn how to do. A lot easier than leather.
And I mean, we've all got enough stuff that I've got stuff to learn. I should have asked more questions while I was at his house because I spent enough time in his shop. I should have absorbed more, but I was never worried about getting into it because he did it, so I didn't need to learn. Now I wish I'd asked more questions, but
well, I guess
yeah,
Sean kind of answered. Sean kind of answered my question in the side chat there. Combine knives or whatever you can use, right?
Essentially, yeah. There's a lot of regulations about it, but pretty much any sharp object.
Okay, and then Chuck says he's got 3 of the lighter cases, but here's one. Now look at that! Somebody made a sheath out of milk jugs. Yeah.
Yep. Pretty much any plastic.
So, you know, I love the leather sheath that I've gotten. But there are certain knives that are not, right? Not good for a Kydex.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to have
what Okay, yeah. What does that mean? What do you mean by retain?
Let me grab one.
Yeah, it has to have a point where it can compress.
Because it's held in by the friction of the Kydex right here. Mm-hmm. So it has to be something that it will absorb, hold it, and that's what it clicks in. But it's just if you see it, it's kind of been rubbing on my knife from going in and out. So it is, you gotta have something that you can't have something with a great big knob. I don't have anything like that, but like the old 511, it's got the big point. It works, but anything bigger than that, it starts getting in the way of all of the getting it to go in the Kydex.
Yeah, and it's like the SE4. This has got a knob on it, but it's not that big. Because eventually, if it gets too big, the molding just won't work, and it'll just slip right out.
Show that again, Joe.
So the SE4, this is not a Kydex. This is just standard plastic, but it works the same whatever kind of plastic sheath you got. This nub is just big enough and just thick enough to work. But like Willie was saying, if that was just too deep, it wouldn't work well because it would just not be able to sit in here if I can pop it out of the sheath. This is a little bit different than Kydex, but it's the same idea. It has to welt to it. And so if it doesn't have a good welt point, it doesn't really work. Or something like this guy here. This has got a rubberized one. So it can be in Kydex. This is Kydex. But because it's rubber, it kind of pushes against the Kydex a little too much. And over time, it will kind of peel it off versus something more solid like Willie's or like with this. This won't move where this will. So this is not necessarily a great candidate for Kydex. Even though the blade guard is thin, it's just the material out of it. The going in and out will eventually ruin this knife.
Oh, okay. So we're saying they should have some sort of scale, right? Like this one would not work because it's all metal and it's flat and everything, right?
Actually, that one would work well because if you see where it swoops up right there by your thumb,
this part right here,
you can actually Kydex that fairly easily.
Yeah. And
then okay. So so it's not about the thickness.
It kind of depends on the shape. It's kind of it depends.
Yeah. And there's multiple kinds. So
Yeah.
there's like taco sheets, like Willie was showing, that are folded. Those can fit certain things, but if you have something that's two pieces put together with a lot of rivets, they fit things a little bit differently. When you fold something, you can get somewhat of a better fit. Like this is folded, but if you're trying to put two
Okay.
independent pieces together, it's a little bit different. Yeah, like that.
It's one piece that's actually folded over, and that way it gets a constant. It's one piece on the spine. Otherwise, you can take them. I'll just put the two together. If I hold it right, where you would have the open on both sides, and then that's where you would rivet them together with with the rivets, and that's what actually holds them together. Is these little rivet things that go through. And then you would trim this off, take the corner off, make it more sheath-like. But
awesome, fantastic. Well, it looks like our audience is kind of starting to dwindle down, and we're a little bit over an hour. But before we do go, I want to thank everybody for coming on, and I want you guys again to go ahead and give a little shout out to yourselves about your channel. Go ahead, Joe.
For those that weren't here in the beginning, my name is Joe. I run the Balefire Outdoors channel. Been on YouTube almost 6 years to be exact. I do all sorts of outdoor stuff, and I talk mainly about a lot of topics other channels don't. You get a lot of B-roll cooking. I do a lot of environmental science, wildlife science, some of the policies and stuff, kind of the stuff you want to know to keep these areas open to go hiking, to be able to do outdoors. It's a lot of fun to be in the outdoors, but you also have to make sure that it stays natural for everyone. And so I try to cover those topics as well as knife reviews, other gear, and things like that.
So if you guys don't know, Joe is going to come back because I wanted to do one on a talk about global warming, conservation, things like that. And Joe does have a degree, correct, Joe?
2. I have one specifically in wildlife.
Degrees. Oh, awesome. And of course, Willie's going to come back because he is a farmer. He'll have his kind of his insights on that. Willie, you want to talk to people about your channel a little bit too?
I'm a little bit of a hot mess over on my channel. I do a little bit of everything. I do show a lot of what we do. I do at work. My parents and I have an apple orchard / I would say truck garden. We've got about 10 acres of vegetables and a hydroponic greenhouse. I do like to go camping, but I'm horrible about filming it because I'm usually busy camping. But I do like to go outside. I'd like to do all the hunting, fishing, trapping. I haven't done the best about getting them filmed this year, but we're going to start trying harder. Yeah, I do a little bit of everything.
Well, and you guys know me. I'm A-OK Foraging and Adventures, and my channel's a little bit of a hot mess too. I was in quarantine for a long time because of the COVID, and right now my lungs are not up to capacity for me to go out and film. So we decided to do Talk with Thack Tuesdays. Willie is on every single week with me. Folks, make sure you check that description box. Their link directly to their channel is in there. Just click it, and you know what? Don't just subscribe to them, support them. So, guys, thank you both so much for coming on. I mean, this was fantastic. We had so many questions rolling there for a minute that we, so hopefully maybe we will have another chat about knives again, because that was really interesting. I think once YouTube will see if they will let me do a gun one or not.
Oh.
That is a really hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to all of a sudden lose my channel because we're talking about guns, But we'll see how this goes. But I know that Joe will come back for the conservation one because, that's why I started watching you in the beginning. Tons of conservation stuff, and I've been subbed to you for a long time, and then you changed your name, and I was like, who the heck is this? And I was like, hey, that's Joe.
Trying to get around the algorithm hating me.
Yeah, right. So folks, guys, thank you so much. I am going to end this live stream. If you guys want to come back next week, it is cold camping topic. All right, folks, until next time, may all your adventures Be A-okay.